All right, we ready to go, Carol?
Uh-huh.
All right. All right, let me do my share screen here, see if I can get that right. All right. Did I do it right, Carol?
That's good. Looks good.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Roger Harris. I've served as the parliamentarian for a number of years now with the NCRSP. I never want to embellish my resume, though. I want to be upfront and say I am not a licensed parliamentarian, but I am a member of the North Carolina Association of Parliamentarians and the National Association of Parliamentarians, and I've done this for a while. So I just want to give you kind of an overview, as very briefly this morning, about some basics of parliamentary procedure. I'll probably go over some stuff that you already know, but that's okay. Sometimes it's good to be reminded of things that we've got. So let's just go ahead and get started. One of the first things I like to think about is who in the world is this Robert? We've always heard of Robert's Rules of Order, and we do have to have rules. There's different kinds of rules. If you ever watch C-SPAN, first of all, bless your heart, but if you ever watch C-SPAN, you know that the House and the Senate have their own rules. They talk about, I'm yielding my time to this gentleman and that gentleman. Different organizations have their own rules, and most organizations have their own rules, and that will take priority over Roberts, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Robert's Rules of Order goes back to the Greeks and then the English Parliament, and the English Parliament really started, and that's why we call it today parliamentary procedure, because it goes back to the British Parliament. And if we think about who in the world this Robert guy was, he was a Civil War general. His name was Henry Martin Robert. He was from the U.S. Army, a brigadier general, and he came up with these rules to really help with church organizations. And his first book was 50 pages, and then it went up to 176 pages. He's obviously long dead now, but the book now is in its 12th edition, and it's almost 700 pages. Now, quite honestly, nobody is going to be able to master 700 pages. But the good news is this: you only use about 10% of Robert's Rules of Order most of the time. So that's all you really need to do to be able to run an effective meeting. And I assume that most folks in this group today are either regional directors or local unit presidents. So you don't have to memorize all this stuff, and we're just going to go over some basic things. If we think of the purpose of parliamentary procedure, it's really a practice of democracy. Excuse me, let me stop my phone there. It's a practice of democracy. It allows for an orderly discussion and debate in a group. It protects the rights of the minority, and it allows for the will of the majority to rule. We want the majority to rule. That's an essence of democracy. But the minority has a right to be heard. And sometimes you can hear the minority and agree with them, and the minority becomes a majority. So that's why we do this. There are three different documents that we look at in our organization having to do with the priority of parliamentary procedure. And they are in order: the NCRSP Constitution, the bylaws, and then Robert's Rules of Order. Now, what I mean by priority is this. When I was a little boy and I wanted to climb a tree, if my big brother said I could climb the tree, but my mama said I could not climb the tree, who's going to win? Mama, isn't she? Because mama has priority over my brother. That's the way it is with these documents. The Constitution, our NCRSP Constitution, that's at the top. That's the mama. That one has control over everything. Under that is the bylaws, which means if there is a conflict between the Constitution and the bylaws, the Constitution wins. And then third is Robert's Rules of Order. That's third in place. If there's a conflict between Robert's Rules of Order and our Constitution, the Constitution wins. Those are our priorities we look at. And most of what we do has to do with emotion. Most motions that you hear in any group are going to begin with these three words. Somebody will stand up and they will say, I move that, and then it'll get started. Almost all those motions take the same way, and there's some certain principles that we look at with those motions. First, you state clearly what the organization is to do, not a vague idea. As an example, if somebody says, I make a motion that we support public education. That's not clear, is it? That's a vague idea. So that motion will be out of order. It has to be something very clear. And here's an example, and the one that we're going to look at in our presentation today. Somebody stands up and says in the organization, I move that we increase dues by $10 effective January 1st, 2025. That's very clear, isn't it? It tells exactly what they want to do and exactly when they want it to start. Somebody else says, I second the motion. Now, that does not necessarily mean that they agree that that motion is a good idea. The only thing a second means is just, I think that's worthy of discussion. Okay? That's all it means. I think we should talk about that. That's worthy of discussion. When it finally gets down to the vote, that person that seconded may vote against it. Only thing they're saying is, I second the motion, which means I think it's worthy of discussion. Now, if you're the president or the chairman and you don't get a second, that motion dies. And what you say is the motion dies for lack of a second. But somebody seconds the motion, and then you as chairman, you state that motion to the body to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. So you say something like this: it is moved and seconded that we increase dues by $10 effective January 1st, 2025. All right, so there's three different steps then. You got a maker of the motion, a second of the motion, and then as chairman, you state the motion. And now you're off to the races. You're ready to debate the motion. So the maker of the motion has the right to speak first. So as chairman, you just recognize that person. You just say, William, you made the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion? And that person gets to go first. If they choose not to, that's okay, but they get the right to go first. You can only have one main motion at a time. That keeps a group from being all confused. Sometimes folks will say, well, I think we also should meet on Wednesday. I make that motion. You have to rule that one out of order and say, well, what we're talking about now is increasing the dues by $10 effective in January. So only one motion at a time, and debate will continue on that motion. You just have folks talk, you recognize them, and you have them talk as long as they're willing to talk about that. And you'll get a sense generally as chairman when they're through talking about it. Everybody will get quiet, and then you just put the question: is there any further debate? Nobody raises their hand. And then you state the question again. It's called putting the question, to make sure that everybody knows what we're voting on. The question is the adoption of the motion that we increase dues by $10 effective January 1st, 2025. And you put that to a vote. Proxy votes are not permitted. A proxy vote is what's sometimes called an absentee vote. Somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, well, Betty's not here today, but Betty said for me to vote for her. Well, I'm sorry, Betty can't vote. Betty's got to be there. That's in our North Carolina Constitution, and it's in Robert's Rules of Order, but they've got to be present to vote. So there essentially are 8 simple steps to handling a main motion. And it's something you just do kind of automatically in meeting. You think about it. Somebody has to be recognized by the chair. They raise their hand, you recognize them. They state the motion correctly. The motion is seconded. Then the chair repeats the motion. That's an important part to make sure everybody understands what the motion is. And then if you have debate and discussion on the motion, the chair restates the motion so everybody knows what they're voting on. And then the motion is voted on. And then the chairman announces the results of the motion. And that's pretty much it. That's the way you handle most motions that come up. Now, occasionally, whenever you're doing this, somebody will want to make an amendment, and you'll recognize them, and they'll say these words. They'll say, I move to amend the motion by, and they're wanting to do something. They're wanting to amend the motion and get it out there. This is how you make an amendment when somebody wants to do that. The motion that's on the floor in our example is, I move that we increase dues by $10 effective January the 1st, 2025. Now, if you'll notice, that motion has 3 parts to it. They want to increase dues, they want to increase them by $10, and they want it to start on January the 1st. So it's got 3 parts to that motion. Somebody stands up and says, I move that we change the effective date from January the 1st, 2025 to June the 1st, 2025. So they're not concerned with the first part about raising dues. They're not concerned about the amount. But what they're concerned about is changing that date. So you've got a motion to amend the main motion. That motion to amend must be seconded just like a main motion. And then as chairman, you restate that motion. It has been moved and seconded that the main motion be amended by changing January 1st, 2025 to June 1st, 2025. Once that happens, y'all, the motion to amend is what's before the body. That's the only thing we're going to talk about now. We're not going to talk about the $10. We're not going to talk about increasing. We're just talking about the date now because that's the motion to amend. Just like you do with the main motion, the maker of the amendment has the right to speak first. And one of my pet peeves, and I've said this a bunch of times, if you guys have been to meet with me, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. I don't know how in the world that got started, but there's no such thing because somebody will inevitably say, would you accept a friendly amendment to change June 1st to July 1st? No, once the motion has been made, seconded, and put to the body, it does not belong to the maker of the motion anymore. It belongs to the convention or the body. So there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. We'll talk about how to handle those in a few minutes. But debate continues on the motion to amend, and then the chairman, just like they do with the main motion, they put the motion out there for debate. And then the chairman has a vote and they announce the vote. And you say it in one of two ways. The motion to amend has been adopted. The main motion as amended is that we increase dues by $10 effective June 1st, 2025. So the main motion has been changed. You're not voted on it yet, but it's been amended. Or if the amendment fails, then you go back to the main motion. The motion to amend has not been adopted. The main motion is we increase dues by $10 effective January 1st, 2025, and you go back to that main motion and you continue debate as before, as long as there's no other amendments out there. When we think about how to debate, and this is one thing as chairman, it's not such a big deal in small groups, and I know some of our clubs only have 10 or 15 members. It's more important in a larger group. But generally, no person is permitted to speak a second time if there's someone who's not had the opportunity to speak the first time. It's just like in kindergarten, you got to take turns. So you don't let a second person speak. There's always somebody in the group that's a little bit more verbose than another, and they want to speak over and over. As chairman, you have to control that. And you just say, Miss Smith, I think there's other folks waiting to speak first. Let me recognize them. You want to be kind because we're all friends. You want to be kind, but you have to keep control of your meeting and make sure that the other people have the right to do that. Comments properly should be addressed to the chairman. You want to keep personalities out of it. You don't want Miss Smith looking at Miss Jones and saying, I think you're wrong for this reason. That creates animosity. The correct way to debate is to talk everything to the chairman, as if you're trying to convince the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't think we should increase dues. We just did that 2 years ago. So you address all comments to the chairman properly, and the comments must be germane. They must be related. I heard one teacher say that you've got to use the F word here, and the F word is focused. The comments must be focused. They must be germane. So in the example we have here, we've got a motion to amend, to increase the dues by $10 effective in January. Well, you might have somebody stand up and say, well, the problem is not the dues. The problem is where we meet. I think that we ought to meet at a different place. This meeting place is not good. As chairman, you recognize that discussion doesn't have anything to do with the motion, and you have to rule them out of order. And again, be very kind to them because we're all friends. So you say something like, well, Charlie, that's a very good idea, and we should talk about that soon. But right now, the motion is on increasing dues. So you keep the comments and make sure that they're germane to the issue. You debate the issues and not the personalities. Sometimes that'll happen. Somebody will stand up and say, well, Charlie always wants to increase the dues. Charlie, not everybody's got as much money as you do. As chairman, you have to keep a lid on that. You debate the issue, not the personalities. Don't let them go into that. And you just gently keep your organization under control and keep on doing that. And generally, a member is limited to 2 times. Once they've spoken 2 times, and again, that's more important in larger meetings. But once that person has spoken 2 times, other folks need to talk. We don't need to listen to the same person over and over. So it's okay to say, Charlie, you have already spoken 2 times. Let's recognize somebody else, and you move on from there. Members may not yield the floor. That's something you see on television all the time. Our Constitution and Robert's Rules of Order does not allow you to yield the floor. If somebody else wants to speak, they need to raise their hand and be recognized. Sometimes debate has gone on long enough and you just want it to stop. I've seen this done correctly and I've seen it done incorrectly. If somebody wants to end debate, what they say is, I move the previous question. Now, sometimes you'll hear folks say, I call the question. That's okay too. That's just old language that was used in previous editions, but it means the same thing. Somebody says, I move the previous question. The motion to end the previous question is a motion to end debate. That just means I think we need to quit talking about this thing and we need to vote on those views. That motion must be seconded. It cannot interrupt the speaker. You can't have somebody just out in the crowd holler, I move the previous question. They've got to be recognized. They can't interrupt the speaker, and they're going to be recognized by the chair, and it is not debatable. Obviously, it would be dumb to debate further to end debate. So you put it to the body and you ask for the previous question vote. Now, what this does, obviously, is it limits people's right to speak. There may be some people who want to speak on that motion, and you're getting ready to shut them down. So it takes more than a majority vote to end debate. It takes a 2/3 vote, the 2/3 vote of those present voting. And if that happens, if you put it to a vote, then 2/3 pass, then you have ended debate and you're ready to move on to the main motion. But do not allow somebody just to call it out from the floor because they're frustrated. Make sure they're recognized and they make a motion and it's seconded. And the way that I've seen it done wrong is somebody will just holler out from the crowd, I call the previous question. And the chairman will act like that person is just the boss of the day. They'll say, previous question has been called. No, it hasn't. The only thing that happened is one person thinks we need to end debate. So you got to do it properly and end debate that way. For parliamentary questions, these are things that come up every once in a while. Somebody will raise something called a point of order. You probably heard that in meetings. And what that means is somebody thinks that the chairman has made a mistake on the rules. It's equivalent to appealing a decision from an umpire on a ball field. You think the chairman has made a mistake, you call a point of order. The chairman will immediately recognize you and ask you what your point of order is. And you may say something like, we just voted to close debate, but we didn't do a 2/3 vote. We only did a majority vote. Well, that is a good point of order. That's a mistake that was made. So you state what you think was wrong with the parliamentary procedure, and then the chairman will make a ruling. The chairman will say the point is well taken. I agree with you. We made a mistake. And then the chairman will fix it. Or the point is not well taken. Your point of order is not accurate, that we did do it correctly. Sometimes somebody will want to just ask the question. They're not sure what's going on, and they don't understand parliamentary rules, and they'll say something like, Madam Chairman, parliamentary inquiry. And if they're not familiar with this, they may just be simple and say, Madam Chairman, I've got a question. Recognize them, and it may be something like, is it in order for us to vote on the main motion now? They just got a question. And so you recognize them and try to answer their question and do the best you can with that. We've talked about majority rule. I think it's important for us to recognize what a majority is. It's a little bit more complicated than what a lot of people think, but there's only a few rules. A majority is more than half of the votes count by persons entitled to vote. Now think about that. More than half of the votes cast. I've been in meetings where somebody just wants to abstain. Well, an abstention does not count. You're not voting. So we look at how many people voted, and then what is over half of that, those people that are entitled to vote. And sometimes you'll hear it talked about, and they'll say, well, it means half plus one. Well, that's not accurate. It's not half plus one. It's just over half. For example, the Cleveland County Board of Education has 9 members. That's how many people sit on our board. Well, half of 9 is 4.5. So a majority is whatever is over 4.5. So a majority of 9 is 5. That's over half. If the correct answer was half plus 1, 4.5 plus 1 is 5.5. So it takes 6 members. So you determine whatever half is of ever how many people vote. So if you've got 20 people sitting in a room and you have a vote and 8 of them sit on their hands, only 12 vote. Half of 12 is 6. So 7 then becomes a majority. It's over half of the people that vote in a particular vote. And so here are some tips and reminders, things that I like to think about. And one of the things I remind the convention every year when we're there is President Gunter is still the chairman. The parliamentarian is sitting there, but President Gunter is still the chairman. I'm not the chairman. I can give advice as the parliamentarian, but the chairman is still the chairman. Now, for most of you that are in a regional meeting or your local NCRSP units, you're not going to have a separate parliamentarian. So the chairman is the parliamentarian. You're doing your own work. Majority rules, but make sure the minority has a right to be heard. Even if it's something that there's only one person that's in opposition, make sure that that person has a right to be heard, because the majority is going to rule, but they have a right to courtesy, they have a right to fairness, and they have a right to have their opinion heard. So make sure that that happens in your group. Make sure that only one matter can be considered at a time. It gets very, very confusing if somebody has made a motion to have a Christmas party, and then somebody else makes a motion that we also have an Easter party. That gets confusing in a great big hurry. So just make sure that you only consider one motion, main motion at a time, and it helps the organization to stay straight on what they're doing. Remember that the maker of the motion has the right to speak first. Recognize that person. And if it's a large group, it's a good idea to go back and forth on the two sides. The maker of the motion speaks in favor of the motion, and as chairman, you can say, is there anyone who would like to speak against the motion? Let that person speak. And then you can say, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the motion? It's always good in a large group if you can go back and forth. There may be 10 people wanting to vote, and all 10 of them are in favor of it, and you're wasting a lot of time. So see if somebody wants to speak against it, and that's the best way to kind of handle those things. And remember that the governing documents trump Robert's rules. We pay a lot of attention to Robert's Rules of Order, but our NCRSP Constitution and our bylaws, those are supreme. If there's a conflict with Robert's rules, those are the things that are going to win. Here's some of my pet peeves. If you've been in some of my groups before, Roger Harris has 4 pet peeves, and I want to talk about those. First of all, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. But here's how you can handle those things and how you handle it properly. Sometimes a friendly amendment is just a small amendment. There's a capitalization error in the motion, or there's a misspelled word. And somebody will raise their hand and say that there's a word that's misspelled in the first line. I make that a friendly amendment. Well, as chairman, what you can say is, are there any objections to correcting the spelling? Nobody's going to say anything because everybody wants everything spelled correctly. So you have given unanimous consent. Basically, the body has voted by remaining silent. They don't have to say anything. So it's not a friendly amendment. You have had agreement from the body. Motion to call the question. Remember, that is not an absolute power. That's one of my greatest pet peeves. Whenever somebody in the crowd just hollers, call the previous question, and the chairman shuts down debate because one person wanted to shut down debate. Make sure that if you're going to close debate and keep people from speaking, that you do it properly. You get a second to that motion, and you have a 2/3 vote to get that passed. And remember that majority means over half of those people that are present and voting. Again, so if you've got 20 people in the room, but only 12 vote, you just ignore those other 8 people. They've taken themselves out. You're only looking at those 12, and a majority of those 12 is what's going to carry the day. So make sure that you just look at those that are present and voting. And a body, one of these, and this is kind of a minor point, but a body does not vote on a treasurer's report. When a treasurer gives a report, if you're sitting in the room, you have no idea if those numbers are accurate or not. You just know that's what the treasurer is saying. So unless this is being referred to an auditor, you really don't need to vote on the treasurer's report. I don't guess it does a whole lot of harm if you do, but properly by Robert's Rules of Order, you don't vote on a treasurer's report. You just accept it as information. There are a couple of resources I want to give to you. And I know a lot of you don't want to buy a 700-page book. I get that. But here is one of the best brief books I can recommend to you. It's called Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. It's available on Amazon. I think it costs about $7 or $8. It's not very expensive. And really the only thing, if you're a chairman of a local unit or you're a regional director, the only thing you really need to do is read chapters 2 through 4. That takes about 30 minutes, and it's really well written. It's in simple language. If you will just read those, I promise you, if you are at church or pretty much in any meeting, you're going to know more than almost everybody in the room. If you just look at that little paperback and read chapters 2 to 4, that's going to get you there. Another good online source that I always recommend is this webpage. It's called jimslaughter.com. It has charts, it has articles, everything is free. It has handouts, lots of good information at jimslaughter.com. And he has some really good charts and things. Here's a couple of charts from his webpage that we actually had in our book at the NCRSP convention. And it tells you very quickly what the rules are. For example, you look at this first one, somebody wants to close the meeting. Well, what they say is, I move to adjourn. Can it interrupt the speaker? No. Does it require a second? Yes. Is it debatable? Somebody wants to talk about it? No. Is it amendable? No. And it takes a majority vote. So you can very quickly look at this, and here's another one that's on there. You can very quickly look at these lists, and you can see most of the motions you're going to deal with and look very quickly to see if it requires a second. Is it debatable? Can you amend it? And that's a very easy chart, and it's all available free at jimslaughter.com. Madam President, I know we've given a lot of information. Here's my email address and my text message. If questions occur to you later, I'm absolutely available for questions. Send those to me or give me a call. I'm happy to do that.
Beautiful guy. Speak up, because you know you can hear you hear your grandma real good.
Oh, okay. I heard somebody talking there. But if you got questions later, I'll be happy to get those. And really, if you've got a tough meeting coming up, there's something very controversial in your organization, and you know it's going to be a tough meeting and it's going to be hard. If you'll give me a call, if I'm at all possible, I'll drive to where you are. I consider that part of my duty as state parliamentarian, and I'll drive to Durham or wherever we got to. If you've got a tough meeting and you want somebody by your side to make sure that everything is done okay, then I'm happy to do that if I'm available. And I'm available most of the time, and I've done that on a few occasions. So let me see if I know how to get this back to Carol.
Roger,
yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I did not hear you mention that a motion can be amended only twice. Is that not correct, or is that incorrect?
Yes, ma'am. That is correct. The motion you make a motion to amend, that's called a first degree amendment. Yeah. Somebody can motion to amend the amendment. That's called a second degree amendment. And you're right. We didn't talk about those today because that's sort of getting into the weeds a little bit. But in old days, and I mean really old days, somebody would make a motion to amend the amendment to the amendment. That's called a third degree amendment. And that's not permitted under Robert's Rules of Order anymore. So you've got the amendment, that's first degree. Somebody can vote to amend the amendment, that's second degree, but there is no third degree amendment. You're right, Sandra.
But the main motion is not counted as part of the amendment.
That is correct. So somebody has a motion. Let's say the motion is, I move that we have a Christmas party. Okay, there's your main motion. Somebody makes an amendment to have that Christmas party on December the 1st. So our main motion is to have a Christmas party. The amendment is to do it on December 1st. Somebody can then make an amendment to that amendment and say, I think it should be on December the 1st at 5:00 p.m. So that's an amendment to the amendment. But then that's the limit. And you take care of them in reverse order. We take care of the 5:00 first. That was the last one done. And then the motion to amend, which was on December the 1st, and then the original motion, which was to have a Christmas party. And I should have mentioned it, and I didn't. Make sure that all motions are stated in the affirmative. If somebody says, I make a motion that we don't have a Christmas party, rule that motion out of order, because that's going to be very confusing, isn't it? If somebody makes a motion that we don't have a Christmas party this year, then if you don't want a Christmas party, you're voting yes. And if you do want a Christmas party, you're voting no. That's confusing. So make sure that a motion is made in the positive, not that I make a motion, we don't raise dues or we don't have a Christmas party. Rule those motions out of order, but tell them to make that motion in the affirmative. I move that we do have a Christmas party. And then if you don't like it, you can vote no.
Thank you, dear.
Yes, ma'am. It's always a pleasure. Carol, I know we went through a lot of information there. I hope that was not too quick.
No, but we should ask if there are any other questions while they have you live and have your expertise available.
Yes, this is Bill Flight. I have a question, Roger.
Yes, sir, Bill.
I don't really need this for retired teachers. I'm not an officer, but I'm a deacon, the only deacon in a church, a small church. So would these slides be available for someone outside, for an organization other than the retired school?
Yes, sir. These same the jimslaughter.com, that's just Robert's Rules of Order, and that's available. And I'm also the parliamentarian in my church as well. I'm also a deacon too. And these same rules apply to pretty much any organization. Now, if your church has a church constitution or church bylaws, that would take precedent over Robert's Rules of Order, just like our NCRSP convention rules take precedent. But if your church has a church constitution or your denomination has a constitution, that would take precedence over Robert's rules. But these same rules apply in a church meeting. You do the very same thing in most church meetings. Obviously, in church meetings, you have to be very, very kind to people because that's your church folks. Yeah. But you still maintain the rules and you maintain order as the chairman of the body.
So I can get this same information at jimslaughter.com, you said?
Yes, sir. You go to jimslaughter.com and you can print out those 2 sheets that I showed there a minute ago. And there's lots and lots of information there. Let me go back one so we got it. But jimslaughter.com, if you'll go there, there's articles and charts and handouts, and they're all easy to download, and you can print those out, and they are really helpful in any organization. I'm a parliamentarian for my church and a political organization I'm in. They all work equally well in all those. And that little book that I talked about, Bill, if you'll get that thing and just read those few pages, that chapter 3 through 4, that will give you a ton of information. And it's really easy to read. You really can read it in about 30 minutes if you're kind of a normal reader. It's a very brief read. A lot of the rest of it has to do with writing bylaws and stuff like that we don't ordinarily use. But that part there talks about how to handle a normal meeting and most of the motions that come up in a meeting.
And Debbie has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Debbie.
As a chairman or president of a group, does that person have the right to make a motion or enter discussion without as the chairman or president?
No, but this is what a chairman can do. A chairman has to remain like a judge. They have to remain nonpartisan. So that chairman cannot make a motion and cannot engage in debate. But what a chairman can do is this. If a chairman wants to engage in debate, the chairman feels very strongly about something, and the chairman wants to engage in debate, what the chairman has to do is quit being a chairman. So what a chairman can do is, I'm going to turn the gavel over to the vice chairman, or whoever's there, or to the secretary. The chairman leaves the podium, goes out into the audience, and then that chairman is no longer a chairman. So then that person can engage in debate and can do the other things. But it's called surrendering the chair. You surrender the chair to somebody else. And once you surrender the chair, until that motion is taken care of, you don't go back up there. It's not like tag team wrestling. Once you step off the podium, that other person has control of the meeting until that motion is finished. And then you can go back up.
Okay. That's my pet peeve.
Yeah, it surely is. And it would be a point of order. If you're sitting in the audience, it would be a point of order to say, point of order, Madam Chairman, I don't believe that you're supposed to engage in debate while you're chairing. That's not ugly to say that. It just reminds them, because sometimes folks get very emotional and they've got an opinion. And, if you've got an opinion, it's hard to keep your mouth shut. And chairmen sometimes need to be reminded of that, but they need to be able to come down to the floor and engage debate, but they can't do it from the podium. Now, we'll say this, that a chairman is still a member of the organization. They can't engage in debate, and they cannot, they just can't engage in debate while they're chairman. But once it comes time to vote, a chairman can vote. That chairman is still a member of the organization, so they can vote. A lot of chairmen choose not to, just to give that appearance of fairness. but a chairman can vote. And a lot of times a chairman will vote only to break a tie. But there's nothing in Robert's rules that says if when Linda Gunter is on the podium, Linda Gunter is still a member of NCRSP. Now she won't engage in debate while she's chairman. But when it comes down to vote, Linda Gunter has the same right to vote as Debbie and Roger do. She's still a member of the organization. So the chairman can vote, but you're right, Debbie. They ought not engage in discussion while they're up there. They ought to come out onto the floor along with everybody else, and there they can engage in debate.
Thank
Good
you.
question. Good question.
Question.
Yes,
Ma'am.
ma'am.
My question is, there has been some debate on the phrasing for a motion. I move that, or I make a motion. May both of those be used, or is
Yes,
one?
ma'am. Both would be proper.
Okay.
You know, as chairman, you know, this is not a court of law. We're all friends, and you know what they're wanting to do. And a lot of times, as chairman, you need to help somebody if they're not very familiar with the rules. And somebody says, "I think we should have a Christmas party," and then as chairman, you say, "So are you making that in the form of a motion? You want us to have a Christmas party?" And they say yes. Then as chairman, you help them out. You say, "All right, Betty has moved that we have a Christmas party." And, you know, we're all friends. We want to be kind to everybody. But either one of those languages is correct. But even if somebody just says, "I think we should do whatever," you know, help them out and say, "Are you making that in the form of a motion?" And sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, I want that in the form of motion." Sometimes they'll say, "No, I'm just talking." You know?
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sandra?
Is there another
reckon-
question?
You
Sandra has-
recognize? Roger, if
Yes,
the
ma'am.
chairman or president in our case,
Uh-huh.
wants to have some action, is it permissible by Robert's rules to say, after maybe the president has discussed an issue, do
Yes.
I hear a motion? Is
Yes.
it okay?
Yes, that is proper, because up until the motion, there's 3 steps. Up until the motion is made and seconded and then restated by the chairman, up until the time those 3 things have happened, we're just friends talking. You know, you're sitting around the table and we're just talking. So the chairman can, you know, we're sitting around talking and the chairman says, "You know, we really ought to have a Christmas party. We've not done that in a long time. I hope somebody makes a motion to have a Christmas party, or would somebody like to make that motion?" And yes, the chairman can do that. But once that motion is made and seconded, and then the chairman says the motion is that we have a Christmas party, at that point, the chairman got to shut up. They cannot engage in debate at that point. But you're right, Sandra. Up until that time, it's just people talking then. We're just sitting around having a conversation.
Yeah.
And really, you know, the larger the group, the more formal you have to be. If it's just a group of 8 or 10 people sitting around, you don't have to be super formal with this stuff. We're just 8 friends sitting around. You know, we just want to make sure we get the work done.
Thank you, dear.
Yes, ma'am. And while folks are thinking, if they have another question, I know some of this can seem intimidating, particularly if you're a first-year chairman. And I say chairman, the new language is just chair. I shouldn't say chairman. But if you're a new chair or you're a new president, don't let this intimidate you. You know, you're mostly just trying to organize things and keep them going in the right direction. And if you make a mistake, then somebody in the group will help you out, and they'll say, you know, point of order, I think we need to vote on that. Then, you know, just be relaxed. We're all friends. We all want to do the right thing, but just kind of keep things going in order in your organization.
There's another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Is
Paulette.
it true, or am I misled, in a small group in which the chairperson is, of course, carrying out the meeting, there's 5 people, 6 people at the most on the board, that the president or chairperson can move an item, make a motion? Is that
No, ma'am.
important?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
A chairman may not make a motion. Now, like Sandra Hatley said a minute ago, the
sorry.
chairman can suggest to somebody, if somebody thinks it'd be a good idea, then the chairman can do that. But the chairman ought to never make a motion by themselves.
Thank you. That's what I thought you
Yes,
said
ma'am.
earlier.
Really, if it's just 5 people sitting around, I just talk. That's sort of like at my Thanksgiving dinner when my family's sitting around. We don't do Robert's Rules of Order sitting around the table at Thanksgiving. It's just friends sitting around talking. If you've just got a group of 5 in a committee, then until it gets time to take some real serious action, you're just friends talking. You never want to be so strict with Robert's Rules of Order that people feel intimidated in the room. It's just a way to keep things organized and make sure that you're getting some decisions made. But you never want to make people feel uncomfortable in the room, of course.
But Roger, if you are taking minutes of this discussion, then the only thing that should be in the minutes is the official motions, not the entire discussion dialogue of the whole meeting.
That's
Points
exactly
that
right.
should be in your secretary's notes in the minutes.
Yes.
Should be just the motions that are properly made and seconded and voted on. So that's
You're exactly
why
right.
we would
Yeah.
take that kind of formal action. It's just to record
That's
the
right.
action of that group.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. And minutes are just that. Robert's Rules of Order actually tells how to take minutes. And you're right, Carol. That's a mistake that I've seen sometimes people make. Minutes, listen carefully to this. Minutes are a record of what was done, not what was said. Okay? Minutes are a record of what was done, not what was said. So, in a court journal, you're going to have all the testimony in there. But minutes should look like this. Betty made a motion to have a Christmas party. It was seconded. The motion passed. That's all you need to have in there. Now, what may have happened in the meeting is you had a motion to have a Christmas party, somebody seconded, and you talked about it for an hour and a half. None of that is relevant. The only thing that's relevant is, did the motion pass or did the motion not pass? So the minutes, even if you talked about it for an hour and a half, the minutes should read, Betty made a motion to have a Christmas party. It was seconded. The motion passed. That's all that's in the minutes. You're exactly right. All the discussion part, none of that is relevant because the minutes are a record of what was done, not what was said. Good question. Good question.
And the recording of this session will be posted on the NCRSP.org website. So anyone can go back and review it. If they're preparing for an event or meeting, they can go back and review it and get another refresher from the recording of this session.
Thank you, ma'am. And again, you've got my telephone number and you've got my email address. If something occurs to you later, shoot me an email or give me a call. I'll be happy to answer those questions. And we did not, of course, go over everything today. We didn't talk about tabling motions and all that. You can't do everything in a 45-minute session, but we covered most of the basics. So if something comes up to you later and you're not sure how you postpone something or table some of those things that kind of get into the weeds a little bit, I'll be happy to talk you through that or answer an email. And again, if you've got a very difficult meeting coming up in NCRSP and there's going to be quite a bit of contention there and you need a kind of a referee to help you, I'm happy to come to your meeting and serve in that capacity if that'd be helpful. I just see that as part of my duties as parliamentarian. Don't charge a nickel. Okay. So if I got to drive to Durham, I'll just enjoy a drive to Durham and have your meeting and get me a hot dog on the way home and I'll call it a good day. I'm happy to do that.
Roger.
Roger, the moderator, this workshop, can someone other than a member of RSVP view this Zoom recording?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'll leave that to Carol to answer.
Yeah.
Carol, the question was, can somebody other than a member of this organization view the recording?
Yes, they can, because we do have the website open. It is not password protected. It is open to the public for any of the information that we share. So they should be able to go on and look for the leadership series training and look for the parliamentary procedure session and click on that and view the recording.
All right, thanks very much.
Good.
Roger, I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And our power went out, so I missed about 10 minutes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's
Mine was
okay.
out Wednesday. I did mine earlier.
I'm glad to know that it is recorded, but I wanted to know if we wanted to be trained as a parliamentarian. How would you go about that? How did you get your training?
Most community colleges now will have a course in parliamentary procedure. That's a good place to have it. Sometimes there are some private organizations that will do that, but those are kind of rare. The community college is a real good source. And as senior adults, we don't have to pay tuition whenever we take a course at a community college. So you can take the courses at the community college. There's a number of online places that give a lot of information. But unless you want to be a licensed parliamentarian, and as I said at the first, I'm not a licensed parliamentarian. That's somebody like an attorney that helps charter organizations and writes bylaws and that kind of stuff. And if you're just wanting to run a meeting and run a good meeting in your church or your ladies club or community club or whatever, you get that little book I recommended and read chapter 2 to 4, and you are going to be a-okay. There are two organizations. There is the North Carolina Association of Parliamentarians, and you can find that on the web, the North Carolina Association of Parliamentarians, and then there is a National Association of Parliamentarians, and they have information as well. If you want to become a member of those organizations, they have an entrance test. There's a test you have to take. So you study parliamentary procedure, and then they have a simple online test well, I said simple. It's really kind of complicated. They have a complicated test, so not everybody gets to be members. You got to show some knowledge of parliamentary procedure to get to be in there. But their website still has a lot of interesting articles and a lot of things like that. Things like if you're in a meeting and the power goes out, what do you do? So there's a lot of things that they get into some weeds on that we don't usually handle. But I would recommend checking your local community college to see if they're going to offer a parliamentary procedure course. Most community colleges do that about once a year. And also, if you can look, if there's a large church organization in your community, I don't know what the largest denomination is in your community, but if you look at that, sometimes those church organizations will have a parliamentary procedure workshop once a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, folks, I'll say it's my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about parliamentary procedure, but I understand that can be like talking about the War of 1812. It can be very boring stuff, and I recognize that. But it's important for us as leaders to have some basic knowledge of parliamentary procedure to make sure that minority opinions get heard and that the majority rules, that we run a good meeting and everybody leaves feeling that they had their fair shake and everything was done properly. That's the important thing for a chairman, and I hope that we're all able to do that.
Thank you very much, Roger.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Roger. See you next Friday.
Well, I'm actually going to be in Dallas, Texas. I'm going to miss that meeting. I've got a grandchild that's graduating.
Well, bless your heart, you enjoy yourself. That's more important.
I thought so as well, and so did she.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
This is great.